Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with this stage. So 5 years since the launch of Pix, it's now consecrated as Brazil's leading means of payment. It's ahead of cash. By March this year, more than 150 million people, taxpaying individuals, have carried out at least one Pix transaction. And a study of the geography of Pix carried out by FGV, Getúlio Vargas Foundation, in 2024, 53% of Brazilians carried out at least one monthly payment by Pix. This FGG study means that Brazil's instantaneous payment, Pix, is one of the leaders worldwide. Pix is now essential for the country's inclusion journey, which includes people and has great outreach. Obviously, it has some challenges, for example, fraud combat, but automatic Pix and contactless Pix, there are a number of developments that are going to come. So with a roadmap for 2025, sorry, did my microphone cut out? Okay, it's back. Fortunately, let's understand how Pix, with these novelties, is going to help us overcome or go beyond something which is already a success. I'm going to invite Adriano Milani of Citibank Brazil, leader in trade solutions, Breno Lobo, acting head of competition and market structuring, central bank, Carlos Net, CEO of Matera. He's come with a group of supporters as well. Cesar Borali, associate managing director of PCMI. Luciana Sears, head of individual development, Santander Bank. Oh, everyone's got their supporters with them. I'd like to thank you all for being here in this panel. And so 5 years since the launch of Pix, it really is the chief means of payment in Brazil and is a benchmark internationally. As you see it, what's the main advancement that Pix has caused? I'll start with Breno, if you don't mind. Hello, Carol. Thank you very much to FEBRABAN for this invitation. It's a very positive balance for Pix in the central bank. You were talking about certain aims that we achieved through Pix. When we began to think about something like Pix in 2018, it was to reduce the use of cash and to extend payments, to reduce the use of money. The federal bank published these objectives. It led to greater digitization and drove down costs. These were the main objectives or endpoints, but the secondary ones, some of them thought it was created for financial inclusion, but it was a secondary endpoint, as it were. We realized that it would have this scope when we began to roll out the product. 150 million users, 70 million Brazilians who began to transfer cash through Pix. They didn't before. There's access to other payment services. Pix was an entryway, and the consequences, the positive consequences in terms of market competition, a number of new agents offered it as a competitive factor, new businesses and business models with effects on the real economy. We've carried out a number of effectiveness studies. It affected more than 1% of the GDP, which was saved annually owing to the savings implicit in the use of Pix. That was our balance when we took stock, and the central bank is now working because Pix cannot stop and just rest on its laurels. We're always continuing to develop new products and functionalities. We're working strongly with automatic Pix. It was launched just the other day on Monday. It's like It's like an automatic standing payment, more automation, more use cases for standing payments using the infrastructure of PIX, with all the benefits for the population, zero tariff, zero fee, and above all for companies who will have access to yet another tool for accounts payable. So we've been working very hard to make sure that everyone is ready, and we hope that this will drive another revolution in the automatic payments market. We're also looking at PIX by installments for credit tied into PIX. A number of banks offer that service. We're going to standardize it with the PIX by installments for transfers when, for example, a consumer hires the service, and it should be launched by the end of this year, we expect. And another advance that is in the pipeline, also cyber security. We permanently consider cyber security in our group. A number of associations take part, and we're developing new security mechanisms and also self-service for returns, PIX for returns. The possibility also of complaining and questioning PIX transfers. So users are going to be able to make complaints about frauds so that they can get their resources back quicker. And also 2.2.0, which is going to enable the traceability of the whole chain of payments from the account that committed a fraud. Fraudsters are extremely professional. They have false front accounts, but at the end of the day, the money always has to go into another account. So we're going to be able to trace the entire route that the money traveled, blocking all of the accounts, not just the account that originated the fraud, so that the victim can be remedied. And obviously, security can never stop in terms of its developments. That's really good. Interesting to know about all of these novelties. Now for Cesar, the studies carried out by PCMI, do you think that PIX is a catalyst of dramatic changes in the international market, in the financial market? And what can PIX teach the rest of the market? Yes, we do see it as being very successful around the world, not just in Brazil. When we look at PIX today, it's a very clear example of collaboration between the regulatory side and private enterprise. And that was one of the main lessons that Brazil taught the world. When we look at this, we might think it's a relatively new issue in Brazil. But in a timeline, central bank and other government organizations in Brazil encouraged this conversation in the market a long time ago. So right from the 1970s, with increasing digitization, for example, of bank slips for payment in 2010, and this all culminated in the law of payment institutions, which came out in 2019. These were fundamental for the success of PIX today. PIXs always have an account. This creation of a regulatory environment really encouraged new entrants into the market. The barrier to entry is much lower than it was in the past. And this means that deconcentration occurred. And there have been some external factors. 87% of the population has access to the internet. 92% have access to a smartphone. And the level of banking is up to 94%, which wasn't the case before the pandemic. All of these were catalysts in PIX's, or drove PIX's success. These are interesting lessons for the world. And I think that collaboration and being able to offer collaboration between the government side and private enterprise, and how this fosters development. Interoperability is very important. It improves the exclusiveness. This is very interesting for the population in the first case. Then concern to balance convenience and security. This increased the scalability and the stability. There were some points which were very crucial for the central bank at first. The fact that it was mandatory for the banks and then the standardized offering, and these were well accepted. In other markets, they launched similar offerings, but for example, it wasn't standardized across banks. And marketing has been very important. It's a real difference, so that people didn't insist on a particular bank's brand. And finally, as Breno said, the impact of PIX goes beyond PIX. It's digitization, making the population much more computer savvy. The average number of bank accounts in 2000.
Voltou. Bom.
The microphones are cut back in.
2020 para quase 6 contas em
3.5 accounts per person is up to nearly 6 per person from 2020 to 2025. Those are the main advances. I was talking to Breno a little bit before the panel began. I really am very proud of PEAKS, and I'm very grateful that I took part right from the outset. There were 2 points which made a difference in my view. Standardization that we have in our market, ease of use. Whatever bank you're using, you can access the application, and then issues of how important it was to standardize in the market. These are another thing you mentioned also, which was well mentioned, the space that the central bank allowed so that society could take part in the creation of PIX. These were all absolute advantages and differentiators that we had. So the banks were able to help in creating the PIX. And this enabled us to develop a very successful product that, as I want to underscore, these were essential points. Now, Luciana, can I ask you, the report on the first quarter of 2025 said that Santander said that means of payment stood out in its result. What's the importance of PIX for your customer central strategies? I would say that PIX is really our major strategic pillar. When we say that 96% of what customers do using our app, or payments or transfers or something related, where they can see proof of payment and transfer, this really shows that it's important in people's daily lives. On average, customers carry out 20 PIX per month. So it's not every now and then or sporadic or ad hoc. You're talking about the number of accounts. And for myself, I want a personalized and simple journey, but we've been working on that despite that complexity. In 2024, when we decided bravely to change the PIX journey within Santander, we had some deep arguments and discussions about why should we change it. In itself, it's already very simple and quick. We have technical indicators of stability showing it was very good, but we thought that we could still improve it. And so we began to say that independently of the key, you could carry out a transaction. This evolved to include names and then the frequent contacts, because we know payment customers' payment journeys. Why do I always have to key in my mum's key when I could just press one button and it would show me her name and I could do the transaction? That was part of a very important transition. In the second half of this year, we're going to deliver a new app experience. We're calling it Joan app. And there are more things in the pipeline for payments and lists of commitments of customers. We're evolving on a daily basis. We see real benefits. We've gone up 10 percentage points for peaks and 17% in terms of main customers. Thank you. Luciana mentioned individual taxpayer clients, but Adriano, it shows an evolution in means of payment also for legal entities. Has it been transformative for companies? Carol, if you we were talking about 20 transactions month. When we're talking about legal entities or corporations, for example, Citibank, we're looking at major companies. When you look at this, you can multiply it by thousands in terms of monthly transactions. So if we talk about that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact. And the impact that you had for individual taxpayer at that level, it is thousands-fold in companies. So immediate liquidity, for example, that used to happen in the transfer mechanism called TED. It happens immediately. It's up to 10 seconds, but it's not just online real time, but also there's no cutoff. With TED, you had to make your transfer by 4:30 in the afternoon. Now, really, the transfer is anytime, 24/7. And companies have understood the change in their cash management. This has optimized things greatly. So not only the major corporations, but medium-sized ones have this economic impact of reducing the cost of capital. We've seen this, they don't have to go to, for example, banking institutions to fund their own cash turnover on a daily basis. So it really is very wide or far-reaching. So that's one of the first transactional points. Secondly, which also has to do with capital networks, transactional costs. Once again, it's one thing to carry out 20, but it's another thing when you're carrying out 200,000, for example. And when you're dealing with customers who are paying their bills by Pix, then you get companies that work, for example, B2C. There are massive savings. The effect has been massive. And I think that that is also a second point. A third point, going beyond automation, the market has evolved. At first, it was a barrier, but the market, especially in legal entities, is different from individuals, where you make all your payments and at the end of the month you look at your bank statement. If for legal entities, they have to do this maybe not every day, but they have to reconcile the information for their stock taking, for investment, for cash flow, for perhaps sending dividends back to the headquarters. And this reconciliation was a big barrier. Everybody had to do their reconciliations of bank slips, DOC, TED, etc. And there's been a certain amount of accommodation and more comfort involved. Companies realized that Pix was very simple and also it could be automatic. A fourth point, B2C companies. There's a clear change there, and this has led to an additional journey in companies. Above all, where there's a more widely scattered contact with a far-ranging, less concentrated audience, target audience. And finally, I'm leaving my answer a little bit open-ended because in our use cases with companies, we've seen in those companies that had some very interesting micro cases, case studies or use cases. And they've been small, but they've scaled up. To give you an example, which I think feeds back into automatic Pix. For example, the large utilities, some of them are our customers, They were precursors of the automatic PIX or the recurrent PIX, so it was their use case. Way back when they started to embark a QR code on the banking slips, the bills, to enable the payment to be made by PIX rather than a bank slip, made cash management more efficient. So it's been revolutionary and helped the ecosystem evolve.
Thank you, Adriana. It's interesting for you to listen to both individuals and companies. Now I'm going to talk to Carlos, who is part of the PIX, history of PIX. Matera is a company that generates benchmarks for the market when we talk about the subject. And PIX became an essential infrastructure for instantaneous payment. How do you assess this journey so far? PIX in Brazil is a leader. We had Santos Dumont, Pele, Ayrton Senna. Now we have PIX. Anywhere in the world, you have instant payment. So it's our hero. And for us, we have skipped from the cards to the PIX. We have bet on the right horse. For Matera, it was great. We have 90 million accounts. So we bet on the right horse, and the horse won the race. So we have to thank the central bank for everything they've done because it's PIX made us proud. It's proving the world that it's possible. Many countries thought that things would remain the same for the rest of their lives, and the cards would always be there. Brazil has done it. If Brazil has done it, I'm going to do it. So in this impact, PIX is contaminating the world with the idea that that's possible. So people did a wonderful job. If there's someone from the central bank here, please stand up. I'd like to ask for a round of applause for people from the central bank, people from Brasilia who couldn't come here. These people did something wonderful. And we are globalizing Matera, and I hold meetings in places that I would have never been to if we hadn't participated in the development of PIX. And some people would say, if you hadn't developed PIX, you wouldn't be here. If you allow me, just to confirm what you're saying, somebody who came from New York and he takes care of digital payment. Last week, I was in Singapore, and people from channels asked me, what is happening in Brazil? What is coming ahead? What are you looking at? So it's true what you're saying. Some time ago, they would ask about the Brazilian soccer team or samba or soccer, but the first interest was, what is that? So we are precursors. We became a role model, and I could give you several examples of Argentina, Paraguay, who are following this model, and the number of calls that we have asking people to talk to the central bank or for us to talk about our experience with the central banks from other countries so that we can multiply what we are doing here. I was in a Silicon Valley company that said that PIX would happen in 6 seconds, maximum 10, and the CEO said, no, you don't need so much. It could be an aspirational target. I said, it's not aspirational. If you do everything in 9 seconds, we are fined. That's really serious. So I did one in front of him, and he said, wow, that was the Elon Musk rocket going straight up into the sky. So when I asked them to compare, how many songs talk about Fed now? Because in the first year of PIX, there were 5 songs talking about PIX. So there's no comparison. And to Matera, we have bet on the right horse. We had the integration. It was a collaboration, co-creation, but the execution SPI was brilliant. So the product is very stable, scalable. If you would stop every day, it wouldn't be so successful. So it's wonderful. It was wonderful for us. just to thank you, thank the Carlos. We've met in 2018, GTPI. Carol came a little bit later. I'd like to thank you and all the help from the market. When we talk overseas, we've talked to central banks, and if we state a name, we've been of a country, we've been there. So we've shared our experience with lots of central banks.
Essa interação que a gente
And this interaction that we could have with the market is critical. It's one of success points that we share. The central bank cannot be closed in their own world looking, I'm going to regulate you banks. We are building products for the population to use, for the companies to use. So we have to leave this bubble of a traditional bank to talk to the end user of the product and to talk to the people who are going to use it, the banks or fintechs, payment companies, to make this product get to the company. So we have to understand everyone's pain so that we can make the best product we can. So this is one of the success factors of Pix. As a provider of technology to the bank, Pix was the first one where we entered the bank with Matera name tag. I would be a provider of technology of the bank. We couldn't be Matera. So at Pix, I started saying that I was Matera. So the central bank talked to many people, and that's critical for the success of Pix. On this first meeting of GTPI, there were people from a church. Can you imagine receiving donation before Pix? It was a huge cost for a church that would receive donations. The church wanted to receive donations, but there was no appropriate channel. So it's something so far from the central bank. On the first meet in May 2018, they were there listening to us and trying to understand what that would be that would help them receive the donations. This is the balance of Pix, talking about the challenges, the popularity and increased use by new modalities of the automatic Pix has the main challenge, the security of security by cyber criminals. How do you address the challenge that can hinder confidence on the platform and cause losses? Breno, I'd like to start by you. How does the central bank see that? Security is one of the main challenges that we have at the central bank about Pix. Because since we've built the Pix, security was always a critical pillar. No company is going to use a payment mode if they don't trust that. So the major issue is that the fraudsters are really creative, they're very professional, and every day they create new frauds. And we have this mission that by the end of the day, it's always be the dog chasing its tail. We will never have zero fraud, but our challenge is to keep controlled figures so that people can continue trusting these means of payment media. So we put together a strategic security group to be different from the work groups that are about technical issues or businesses. And we have a permanent agenda. Every 6 months, we have 2, 3, 4 topics. And it works differently from the other work groups, the PIX form, because the associations that are part of the group, they really work. And generally about the PIX, the central bank proposes something for the participants of the forum. At the security team, people from the market who have the greater know-how than the central bank, they feel the financial losses by fraud. People get together, study, they listen to everyone, and they make a proposal to the central bank. and then we develop new
novas regras.
tools or new rules, and that is continuous. Every 6 months, we have this work group agenda,
Sempre vai,
and we will always have.
em algum momento, vamos parar aqui, vamos
Let's not stop and see what's happening. We can't do that about fraud.
a gente precisa estar
So we have to always develop these new mechanisms for security within PIX. More than 23 associations that put together the strategic group on safety. And it's amazing to see when we talk about security, because it's a very important subject and everybody's interested in that, how the matters work in collaboration so that they're delivered to the central bank, collaborating with that. Talking about security, I'd like to listen to you, Cesar.
Cara, eu acho que assim, a segurança é
I think security is the pillar of PIX. It's a pillar of trust for the growth of the product. Some things that are important, first of all, communication, to have clear communication, the provider of the service, the government, clear communication for several audiences, particularly about data. So when we have recurring PICs, we have the consent journey, data sharing, exposure of personal data, AI,
educação financeira, ela tem
and financial education. They play an important role, but there are more technical issues, maybe a layer of registration, cadastre, and that are evolving. The registration is the most important part. The
nunca vai abrir a conta
the fraudster will never open an account on their own name. So this registration is very important, and the transactional layer is very important. It's not that it's badly done, but it's just evolving all the time. New functionalities, Breno talked about the NET 2.0. There will be a layer, important layer of security. There is another launch by the central bank
você poder
for you to block the opening of new accounts under your name. I think there was something that was very smart for you to control that activity under your name. So in line with these three factors, they shield the product against fraudsters. Thank you, Luciana. Just to add what you said about education, we have to talk about that all the time. It cannot be a campaign, or it cannot be isolated. To talk to the customer in an accessible language, we use social media to talk about security. We have recurring subjects in our blog, and also at the moment of the journey. So when we see that when you do your login, you are in one call, we can talk to the customer to try to leave the hypnosis of a possible fraud. Are you sure about what you're doing? Do you need help? So this education is important. Of course, technology, face technology is good for us to identify who is doing the transaction is the customer. Using data to understand if there's something that is not normal. And we have immediate blocking. We can access from any device with the internet. If you lost your cell phone or your card, you can access from any device this immediate block, and we block your card and your app immediately. So there are small actions that can support you so that you don't miss that innovation that are there is the PIX. And sharing information on the ecosystem so that we can learn and grow together. As a global bank, Santander has security departments all over the world. We exchange a lot about that. It's a global issue, and we bring the lessons from other countries to Brazil. This alert of fraud that Luciana has said, several banks have implemented that solution. We've been through the security group, and we are going to work now this next 6 months so that we can standardize when it should be placed, so that everyone who uses Pix is not restricted and they can present to their customers. It's a very good solution that has the capacity to prevent those frauds actions. So if somebody wants to do transfer based on social engineering, you are seeing co-creation live. So let's do it. And that is very important when we talk about public safety. We cannot move many more than protect and thinking about solutions to our customers at the end of the day. So this is very important. Adriano, what can you add about security for corporations?
Acho que no começo,
I think that in the beginning,
foi criado em relação
everything that people talked about security, all the stress about security, it has helped a lot the companies, because Breno said securities use that, and that's what has happened.
tinha uma preocupação enorme
There was a huge concern about, well, now if I do a transaction, it's gone. How am I going to do that multiplied by 20,000 times? How am I going to do the recovery? If there is an internal fraud, what do I do?
eu acho que isso,
And I think that today,
me corrija aqui, mas
Breno can correct me, based on perception, not data.
eu entendo hoje as empresas
I understand the small and medium companies that have better treasury. This subject is, well, it's not, the problem is not in the companies. The risk is outside. In B2C, it's natural that this talk is mixed with individuals.
de vocês, mas
But
da porta para dentro das empresas,
from the door, from the business's point of view, the PIX is very important, and they have evolved a lot, and they're safer than what they had so far because of the investment of the evolution of PIX.
para dar pouquinho de
So just to give you an example, there are new formulas, and I think that there are old remedies that improved in time because of how immediate the transaction is.
reforço
For example, reinforcement in channels, ERP, apps, the company apps, some security layers. Some companies invested more in that. In e-commerce, they have invested a great deal and not allow the customer to do a transaction without being logged in, so that the logged in is recognized and for the correct messages are given, saying that they are in the right place.
antigos
It was very common in the internet banking there were in the past, but this security layer became more sophisticated. The levels, amounts, number of people who have to authorize, people who do, one does it and the other checks it. That improved a lot.
tá feito. A outra
Because when it's done. Automation and reconciliation. I've talked about that in my first talk.
atingiu nível
There is an automation in checking the balance.
nenhuma interação.
Some companies have no human interaction, so that's good from the point of view
Processo de fluidez,
of processes
mas
and efficiency, and also security and fraud. You have no one inside or outside the company accessing that piece of data.
a inteligência artificial, ela
AI
começado
has started to play its role. There are many things that are just starting.
sendo testados.
There are many things that are being tested, but particularly regarding security, we see that from basic things, identification of transactions that are atypical because of the amount, the time, or repetition, even more sophisticated filters. So we see the companies are using that more and more.
Eu acho que por último, e eu acho que alguém mencionou a questão de treinamento. né? E, lógico, é algo que
Finally, the question of training. Of course, in the retail area, in small companies and individuals, it's important. But for the medium and large-sized companies, they have evolved and have invested a great deal in training their workforces. It could be treasury, could be accounts payable, procurement, etc. They've evolved in this education because the solutions and alternatives and risk mitigations are created by people in the company. It's a microcosm. Also, there's co-creation. That's what's wonderful about PIX with the associated APIs, that it enables that. Breno, this is my feeling in terms of what I've seen from perhaps the outside in our company in terms of developments in security. No, you're right. In terms of the use, in terms of financial value, B2B, not just B2C, but B2B, it's extremely important. That's the major importance. And this is proof that trust, companies' trust in terms of the cybersecurity is total. Well, Carlos, yes, well, we've been talking about problems and issues, but payments by QR code in Brazil exceed payments by PIX keys.
O QR Code estático não está crescendo, é o dinâmico que está.
So it is growing. The dynamic core in Brazil enables the QR code not to be changed. So we have the most robust QR codes in the world.
Digital.
In terms of digital security, you can't exchange a QR code for a false QR code. Brazil has this. And the financial system is being copied, ours, by the rest of the world. And in terms of, essentially, it's more about scams than frauds. Fraud happens in the credit card area. For example, a friend of mine paid 400 real in a payment using a card machine, and he was charged something like 4,000, so tenfold or 100-fold.
Ferrou os 40 mil dele, tá?
40,000, in fact, is what he paid, so 100-fold. So from here on, opening accounts, and for example, these false front accounts, these are the mothers of frauds and scams. It's very important for small companies to, when you open an account, there should be a digital contract, the digital signature of a contract. Brazil has underestimated that. DocSign, for example, DocSales.
O certificado digital é prova de identidade.
This digital certificate is proof of personality, proof of it being of identity. Everyone who is an individual taxpayer, if you have a contract using a CPF and you need a proof of identity, it's harder for individuals. But for example, you can sign within .gov.br. It's friction, and people can enter and ask for an increase of your credit limit. So when you open an account, you need to have absolute certainty of a person's identity.
Verificar a identidade por
It doesn't make sense for all banks to have to do that one by one.
robusta.
And we need a robust mechanism.
Mostrou o rosto, etc.
So, for example, taking a photograph showing your face. Another thing which is experimental, I don't know if it'll work in AI, we never know, we try.
Se não consegue pegar pelo comportamento da pessoa,
If it can't be by somebody's behavior and how they're using their mobile and the type of transaction and the figures involved, these variables
mas o motor de AI
don't make much sense to us intuitively, but AI can tell whether the account is being moved by the owner of the account or somebody who hacked into it. Perhaps the behavior won't be the same. So since there are a lot of PIX data from our customers and everything, we're going to try some AI models
não houve,
whereby you know there was a problem or there wasn't one to identify patterns.
porque daí uma coisa que todo mundo pode usar vai ser algo
And this could, for example, it could be sector-wide then. if people are using AI against us to create robots and images and voices, we can use AI as well to identify that a transaction that's happening is not the person who has the account. We don't know if it'll work out, but we're going to try. We have to use AI on our side. It's not a vain struggle, but it's an inglorious struggle. Hackers are evolving, and they're always on the way back when we're on the way there. They seem to be always one jump ahead of us. But we have to join up the dots and understand that as a pain point. Banks could have already been working harder at this in terms of joining up the dots between people's CPF identity. And we're now going to talk about the international PIX. So this question goes to Breno. The central bank has said that there are going to be signs or studies to integrate PIX internationally. What's your current view of this? What type of international cooperation are you taking into account? At some point, we're going to interconnect PIX with simultaneous payment systems in other countries. This is not short term. We decided to first complete some gaps in our own domestic market. For example, automatic PIX, our problem of not having a direct debit, interbank direct debit mechanism. And in terms of paying by installments, the central bank has always seen PIX as being problematic. Issues of credit, future PIX credit receiving. We're going to improve this for small companies. We have a number of internal problems to sort out first, and the interconnection with other countries' systems is not top priority, but we're very interested. Many countries are interested. We can't prioritize sometimes because of resource limitations. And there's one initiative that we think is very good. It's called Nexus. It's a BIS. It's the central bank of central banks. There's an innovation hub in Singapore which began this study. It's going to be a multilateral hub whereby you connect your system to this hub and simultaneously have access to all the other countries that are connected. At the moment, this is the first project which has become reality. It's been set up in Singapore. Nexus Global Payments. There are 6 Asian countries which are building this. And Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, India, and the 6th, I will always forget who it is. And we'll soon, at some stage, be connecting to that hub. And then we'll have access to any other country that's connected with remittances between companies, purchases that tourists, for example, you can use your app in another country using the QR code. And traders in any country can be instantaneously receiving resources. It's a midterm project. We're thinking of 2028, really. 2029 or 30, this may actually come into being. Thank you, Breno. Luciana Santander has been exploring the possibility of PIX by QR code, and the automatic PIX, as Breno said, is going to be launched soon. How do these initiatives make people's lives easier on a daily basis, and what are your expectations for 2025? It's all about evolution. If you look at the QR code, it was the precursor of the contactless PIX. It was this possibility of putting PIX into the retail world through contactless payments, and now we're raising customers' experience to another level in terms of their journey. Also, bank bills paid by PIX and automatic PIX, which we've been working on. There are some people who I see from the team, they've come here to watch, but as soon as the lecture is over or the panel is over, they're going to get back to work. It's for next Monday. It's going to fill in some gaps in the product. the authorization bureaucracies, the payer and the receiver. The receiver had to list a number of agreements. The payer was confused about that. Where is my code in all of this list? It's much simpler now. But the automatic PIX journey, the essential thing is the conversation with the customer. From authorization, we're going to be talking to customers about that. If it might not work, nonetheless, we're going to warn. And this is a barrier we need to overcome within Brazil. It's not a trivial barrier. Customers, if they don't believe it's going to work, and if they have to choose that payment one day or use the money for something else, it's important to talk to customers all the time and leave the decision-making power in their hands. So we're looking forward to it. The next steps will be, well, we were one of the pioneers for PIX by installments, and it also exists in the context of personal credit. And I'd like to highlight open finance, which is a new threshold for us. Transfers. There are intelligent transfers. You can use money from several accounts that you have to pay a PIX. So there are a lot of initiatives coming. Carlos, you mentioned the tests that you're carrying out using AI in security. But I think there are some more innovations that maybe you're testing that you can bring to instant payments in Brazil. We have Drex and PIX, for example, advancing. What about the convergence between asset tokenization and instant payments? I'm going to talk about international payment as well. Along with Nexus, we're developing a pattern of, or a standard of QR codes in ANSI. QR codes are multi-currency. A retailer can put a QR code up that could be Canadian dollars or Brazilian real or US dollars, etc. So it's in Brazil, the user is going to just pay a PIX, and it could be a remote PIX. It's the charging bank that will carry out the exchange and the liquidity. So any trader in the world, perhaps working with 10 currencies, basically you're making an international PIX without using Nexus. It allows you to integrate. So if Brazil is not connected to Nexus, but somebody might be able to pay in a place that has the QR code. This will be done this year. Our draft is ready. There's a whole governance involved, so we have to take a council vote. But the QR code is for the end of the year. And we're going to have a roadshow in Silicon Valley. We're going to talking to the Fed about Fed now. And you were talking about Singapore. They're including the QR codes of several countries in one. Is it American? But there are Brazilians working there. So if there's a great anti-American sentiment out there, but if it's USD, there's no standard currency. It's not an issue of, for example, having one standard currency or somebody who wouldn't accept it. It's like a forum. It's very good, and we hope that even if there are countries that are not connected, it's like an SBC of payment. It's the only QR code that can copy the PIX and use exactly the same steps that the central bank uses here in Brazil. Also contactless. In terms of international payments, PIX seems to be inspiring everyone. But we can make this start running today. We don't need to wait for everybody. And then we open up a space for international networks like Nexus.
fundo, respondendo pouco de inovação.
Talking about innovation, it's something about innovation. You asked me about innovation to make PIX grow in the rest of the world. Thank you, Carlos. Cesar, let's talk about interoperability.
Como vocês veem o futuro da convivência
How do you see the future of PIX and portfolios and digital portfolios?
Eu gosto de falar que o
I usually say that PIX is a means, not an end. We analyzed it for a long time in terms of who is growing in the market, who's shrinking. But the whole pie is shrinking. In, for example, urban mobility with taxis and Uber, the market is growing in terms of digital payments. In PSMI, we estimate the commercial market around countries. In 2024, we posited $350 billion in Brazil, and we see this becoming 600 billion by 27, about 25% a year. Within the e-commerce market, there are two types of
alternativo de pagamento,
payment. There's alternative methods, which is all payments
digitar número de cartão
where you don't have to key in a debit or credit number. Could be PIX and bank payment bill, etc. And the traditional methods, which are debit and credit cards. Alternative methods are already 55% of e-commerce, which is likely to grow to 64, 65 in 2027. And the PIX is a large factor in that group of alternative methods. So we believe we're going to grow globally, overall, but with different impacts. Credit cards, for example, they still have a lot of strength because of the installments. Debit is going to continue to grow, but there's a greater focus on high net worth and ultra high net worth in the credit cards. There's added value in terms of benefits and loyalty. There'll be a focus on that. In other countries, we've seen
ali se mexendo muito.
the different banks, what they're talking about flexible credentials. It's like a credential for one card to other cards and funding lines. We think that that has a lot of potential. Some banks are talking about liquidating PIX. We will probably see a great deal of collaboration along those lines. Digital portfolios are going to continue to grow because of the customized solutions, PIX in credit, for example. We believe that that is extremely convenient. The focus on open finance might be to be a digital hub for customers.
Inclusive com as big techs entrando ali.
Even with big techs coming into this market, like Google Pay, for example.
E por último, para o Pix,
And there is still a market which is addressable, more than 50 trillion real, which is using TED and other means. So there are other means of payment. We think that recurrent PIX and other natural developments of PIX and among customers,
desse volume deve acabar.
that a lot of that volume is going to go into PIX as well.
Velho que a gente pode falar, eu já vi esse filme antes.
I've seen this film before. When you get older, you can say this. There were a lot of networks before the internet.
Microsoft, quem não sabe,
Microsoft
acabar com a internet.
tried to put an end to internet. They thought it was going to put an end to the market. So people fought, and it's not there anymore.
Ganhar dinheiro com isso, fez a Amazon, fez a Netflix.
So the internet made Netflix, made Amazon, etc.
Tem artigo
So there was an article in 68 which was called Market Myopia. When you focused on the product, you don't think anymore about the market that you're serving. Cards can't go the same way as Kodak. They have to go like Microsoft.
aquela rede dele.
For example, the product is not the network per se. You have to make money on the internet.
Eu vejo esse futuro, a gente
I see this future. For example,
rede de
networks of bank bills, networks for agreements, health plans, all kinds of payment
é igual
networks we had is like it used to be with data.
banco da matéria.
We,
Aqui, o
Emater opened a bank, which was a great showstopper. It was connected to all networks, but you couldn't pay. You had to. You couldn't pay your ordinary tax bills. So there were loads of projects that we had to abort.
tributo pronto.
And if you put the QR code of the tax that you're paying, you can pay everything. You pay everything by PIX. This has reduced the entrance barrier. This is why you have the Internet of Payments.
Eles têm que aproveitar essa nova.
They all have to make use of this new world vision and go forward. They have to reinvent themselves as they go as well. Things will be different in the future.
Chegamos ao fim de
Well, we've come to the end of one more panel here. There were more questions, but we can answer them if you like. But
mas eu vou ter que encerrar
I'm going to have to close the panel, thanking everyone for taking part,
presencial, as nossas torcidas.
both people in the supporters who are out in the audience. I'd like to thank everyone,
Muito obrigada.
colleagues of the panel. Thank you very much.